Thank you. Now, I'm next, and I'd like you to focus on this number, 3 million. I wonder if you can guess what that number is all about. 3 million. It's a big number. It's the number of Chinese consumers, it's a big number of Chinese consumers that are coming to Australia this year with money in their pockets, aspiration in their hearts, and a willingness to spend money in your business. 3 million. It's a big, big number. Now, of course, there are some subgroups in there. There's the numbers of locals. There's about 1.5 million of those. There's about 28,000 migrants every year coming here from China. There's the students. We see them everywhere. There's about 165,000 students in Australia studying here today, these millennials. And of course, there are the tourists, currently about 1.4 million a year. And that number's expected to double in the next 10 years to 3 million. So just think about how fast this number is going to rise. This is the addressable market for you and your business in Australia today if you develop a way of engaging with them. And that's what we're here to talk about, the inbound market, the 3 million. 3 million. It's a big number, right? So it's well over 10% of our population. It's actually the population of Jamaica, 3 million. And as that number starts to creep up a bit, as it will as the tourist numbers increase, as the student numbers increase and gets to 4.5 million, which it will in the next 2 or 3 or 5 years, that's the whole population of New Zealand. Imagine the whole of New Zealand coming to Australia to shop. Now that would get our attention. But this number, the 3 million, is the number I want you to all remember, because that is the addressable market for you today. If you miss out on it, you'll regret it. If you take advantage of it, there's a lot of money to be made. So that's what I want to talk about. And that's why my topic is, why should every retailer in Australia have a China strategy? And I'm going to take you through 9 things that I think you can do straight after this conference, take back to your business and implement tomorrow to address that 3 million number. And I hope you will. Now, one of the sub-segments of that 3 million are the migrants. Now, this is a photograph taken in the 1950s, and that basically looks like what migrants used to look like back in 1954. Now, as we all remember, migrants used to come from Australia, and they started at the bottom of the social pyramid. They didn't speak English, they didn't have an education, they didn't have any money. They worked hard, they got involved in nation-building projects, they brought up children, and maybe in the audience today are 2nd, 3rd, 4th generation people from exactly these people who came to Australia in the 50s. That's what migration to Australia used to look like. What does it look like today? Looks like this. Now these people, they arrive at the top of the social pyramid. They come here with an education, they come here with money, they come here with families, with aspiration, with ambition to change the nature of how things get done here. And these are what we call the millennials. And they've got all this money, and they spend all this money. We're becoming the biggest luxury retail market in the world, Australia, because of these people. And you probably wonder, why have they got so much money? Now, you probably know something called the one-child policy in China. Has anyone in the room got 2 children? Put your hand up if you've got 2 children. Keep your hand up if you've got 3 children. Now, thank you. Now, you know what it costs to raise a child from 0 to age 18. I read it's about $500,000 after tax per child. 3 children? Do the maths. Now, what if you only had 1 child? And what if you started your life in the Cultural Revolution, in extreme poverty? If you're in your 50s now, you probably spent 20 years of your life living on a farm in a very harsh environment. Now, thanks to hard work, thanks to some good luck perhaps being in the right place at the right time, you've accumulated more wealth than you could ever imagine. And what are you going to do with all this money? Well, you've got one child. You're pouring your heart into your one child. You want them to have a much better life than you did. So what do? You give them the best education you can give them. You give them a lot of money to spend. You give them a lifestyle that you could even only imagine when you were their age. And now here they are all in Australia, these 200, 300,000 millennials, and they are driving our luxury retail sector here in Australia. The millennials. And that's a lot to do with that one-child policy. That's why we should be paying attention to that 3 million number, because a lot of them are starting to look a bit like this. Now, I'm David Thomas. I've spent the last 30 years working between China and Australia. I first went to China as a skinny young guy in my 20s in 1989, 30 years ago this year. And over the last 30 years, I've worked with Chinese investors looking to go overseas. I've worked with Chinese entrepreneurs setting up businesses in Australia. I've worked with many Australian companies looking to do business in China. I've got 3 or 4 projects right now where we're taking Australian companies into the China market, looking to export their capability, their products, their innovation into this fast-growing China market. So over the last 30 years, I've learned a lot about culture. I've learned a lot about their environment. And above all, I've learned a lot about how business gets done. In fact, I've written a book about it. How business gets done in China, which you can find on my website, davidthomas.asia. So I feel that I've got a lot to say to you guys about how to engage with the Chinese consumer, because whether you're doing multi-million-dollar deals or you're selling $20,000 handbags, I think some of the principles are exactly the same. And I think the starting point is actually here. Now let's have a look at this. Now you're walking along a street in Guangzhou, a fairly foreign environment to you, and you see 3 stores. Which store are you going to go in? Which store are you going to go in? The one in the middle, right? Why is that? Well, is it because their English was particularly good? Not really. Is it because you thought it was a bit amusing? Maybe. Is it because you knew what products you'd find when you walked in the door? No. Was it because you thought you'd find a bargain in there? No. Why? You did it. You walked into that store because they made a bit of an effort. Not perfect, but quite amusing, really. But they made a little bit of an effort to lure you into their store rather than somebody else's. Now think about this the other way around. A Chinese person coming to Australia doesn't speak English very well, doesn't read English very well, looks at a line of stores, whether this be online or offline. What's going to stand out for them? Well, let's think about that. So here are some things that I'd like you to do. I've come up with 9. And I think all of you, whether you're offline, online, a bit of both, whether you've already got a Chinese strategy, whether you're already selling to Chinese consumers, I think all of you will be able to take something away from this. And if you can't, please come up to me afterwards and tell me you couldn't, and then I'll give you another one. How about that? So, the first thing you can do is put up a welcome sign in Chinese. Right? Not that hard. Online, offline, welcome Chinese customers. We welcome you to our store or our online portal or our business or our product or our service. We welcome you to come and talk to us, and we've put up a sign to say so. And while you're at it, why don't you do a bit more? Put up some red lanterns. Go wild. Streamers, banners, Chinese traditional characters. Say to them, imagine it was you, you're in Australia, it's a foreign environment, come to us, we'll look after you. Not hard to do, right? Hopefully you're all doing it. If not, please look at it and think about how you could put up a welcome sign. Make sure they're welcome to come into your business rather than somebody else's. So the next one is to do with names and brands. Now, I don't know how many of you have a Chinese name, but I suspect it's not that many, other than the Chinese people in the room. So why don't you think about this? Penfolds. Penfolds, well-known Australian brand. If you look at the top 10 wine exports to China, the top 8 are all Penfolds. Now, I like a glass of wine. I've never drunk so much Grange as I have in China. It's fantastic. The Chinese love Penfolds. Do you know why? Because they have an amazing Chinese name. Now, there's one or two Chinese people in the audience. They'll know exactly what those two characters mean. It's the Chinese word binfu, and it means chasing the wealth. Nothing to do with wine, nothing to do with Australia, nothing to do with anything really. Chasing the wealth. Now, why do rich Chinese billionaires, when they're entertaining their business partners, their friends, their clients, why do they bring out a bottle of Penfolds Grange? Because it says to them, I'm chasing the wealth. Please follow me. Simple as that. So rather than just take a name that sounds like Penfolds, or a name that sounds like David Thomas, or a name that sounds like your business, why don't you come up with a name that says something aspirational, just like Penfolds did? Because it will lift you in the eyes of the Chinese, because they're very aspirational. So the next one I'd like you to think about is to learn about Chinese culture. Now, I'm not expecting you to become experts on Chinese culture, but I'd like you to know about this chap. Do everyone know who he is? Confucius. A very famous Chinese teacher. Most Chinese people operate within a framework which comes down from Confucianism. And here he is, Confucius. So perhaps next time you're engaging with a Chinese customer, why don't you ask them about Confucius? Who is he? What did he talk about? What is it about him that has inspired you? And show your appreciation, your understanding, your curiosity about Chinese culture. And while you're going about that, also, why don't you think about something else that's very important in Chinese culture, which is the concept of family. So ask them, where are you from? How many children do you have? Why are you here in Australia? What are the things that interest you? What's important to you and your family? Show your interest in their culture, their family, everything about them, and build that relationship. And you can do that offline, face-to-face, of course, by asking good questions, but you can also do it online by showing your interest, your curiosity, your passion for what they're passionate about, which is their culture and their family. And if you do that, you get a chance to talk about the deal, the product, the transaction, what you really want to sell them. Now, it doesn't matter whether you're doing a multi-million-dollar deal or a $20 transaction, this is the process. Understand, appreciate Chinese culture, become a part of their family, gain their trust, then you can do business. Now, in my case, that involves 3 or 4 trips to China. In your case, you might have to do it all in half an hour. But if you go too quickly to the deal, and you don't spend that time showing your interest, your curiosity, your passion, your acknowledgement of their family, you might never get there. So think about Chinese culture. Get interested in it. Ask open questions. Get curious. Now let's go a little bit further with this idea. I have a saying which comes from a Chinese folklore, which is about 3 cups of tea. 3 cups of tea. The first cup, the first part of the engagement, you're a stranger. You start here as a stranger. You don't know each other. You take this cup of tea, and then, if it goes well, everyone's happy, you move to the next cup of tea, when you become a friend. The relationship has moved on a little bit. You've got their interests. You've started to develop a bit of rapport. And then, if you spend a bit of time as a friend, then you go to the third cup of tea and you become part of their trusted network, their family, their relationships. And from that point onwards, relationships will flourish for the future. They'll send you their aunts, their uncles, their cousins, their children. You'll be inundated with Chinese people who come to you because you've reached that point of trust. So let's go back again. Start from the beginning. You start as a stranger. They walk into your store. They come to your website. Wherever that engagement is, you start as a stranger. You need to earn the right to go forward, to become the friend. And at that point, if you still maintain that relationship and build that rapport, then you become part of their trusted network. And from then on, the world is your oyster. They'll be lining up outside your store. They'll be queuing up to get onto your website. They'll be wanting to build that relationship into something that can go well into the future. So don't just focus on transactions with the Chinese. Focus on relationships and take 3 cups of tea. That's what will get you there. So, relationships, not transactions. Now, think about being a stranger again. What is the first interaction that most Chinese customers will have with you? Probably your website. And going back to my go, come, does your website appeal to the Chinese? Is it in Chinese? Is it easily accessible to the Chinese? Are you giving a good impression from your website, which might be the first place that they go? Now, in our association, the Australia-China SME Association, we've set up a website in China.cn behind the Chinese firewall to allow our members to display their website in China, to make it easily accessible in China. And then, of course, there's a link back to the Australian website. And this is an example, a Roma baby. You're going to meet Catherine this afternoon. She's one of our members. She has her website all in Chinese, all her videos, all her photographs, all the captions in Chinese, making it very easy for Chinese customers to get a first impression and to move from being a stranger, which of course they are at that point, to becoming a friend. Then, of course, she can hopefully take that relationship forward until they become a customer. So make sure that the first interaction, whether it be in the store, in the online world, whatever that first interaction is, make sure in Chinese, in their language, it doesn't need to be perfect, go, come, it doesn't have to be perfect, but it needs to be in their language, in words that they understand. Not just a direct translation, English into Chinese. You need to reflect your brand, your messaging, your positioning in Chinese, in their language. That's what will take you from stranger to friend. So that's very important. Now, the Daigos. We're going to talk, I'm sure, a bit about the Daigos later. I'm not going to spend a lot of time now. Now, we all know who the Daigos are, right? They're the people queued up outside Chemist Warehouse, Woolworths, buying all those tins of infant formula, shipping them back to China. Now, 5 years ago, it was a very small group. You all know what Daigo means, don't you? It means on behalf of. That's what Daigo means, on behalf of. So it started 5 or 6 years ago when Chinese mums and dads in Australia, on behalf of their friends and relations and family back in China, started buying things in Australia and shipping them back. Now, the Chinese are so entrepreneurial that 5 years later, there's now about 100,000 of them. And it's become this massive industry. And of course, we're all worrying about, will we have enough infant formula to cope with this? Is there enough product available to cope with this? And of course, these are big questions. Who knows? Maybe the Daigo channel won't last forever. I don't know. But I think that in the short term, you should regard the Daigos as a free focus group. A great opportunity to showcase your brand, your product, your service, whatever it is, to the Chinese community and people in China right here in Australia. And there are many ways you can do that. This is an event run by my friend Matt McDougall, who runs a business called Daigo Sales. daigosales.com if you're interested. They run events, they invite the Daigos to come in, they invite Australian manufacturers and product providers to display. So everybody gets to try things, to put the skin on their arm, to smell the thing, to look at the brands. It's a great opportunity to test what you're doing in the China market and say to the Daigos, what do you think of this product? Do you like it? You don't like it? What would you prefer about it? What do you think of our name? What do you think of our website? Great opportunity to get direct feedback from the market about your products and service. So instead of thinking of them as a negative influence, which the media tend to play up a bit, think of them as an opportunity to get free advice on what the Chinese think of you, your product, your service, your brand, and how you go about things. Use them. Very important. Now, you need to do your research. One of the things I was saying to Dustin earlier is that one of the things about the Americans that impress me is they really do their research, micro, detailed research. And there's lots of reasons for that. But in Australia, we tend not to, because we have this kind of brash, egalitarian, she'll be right. How hard can it be? We can get into the China market. It's not that difficult. But it is quite difficult. I mean, just some of the things Dustin was saying, my God, it's an alphabet soup of stuff to get your head around, but you need to do your research. Now, you've all heard of the company Burberry. Burberry in the UK, very well known in China, a very good, strong brand in China, great products, big turnover, big China team. Now, Burberry in the UK came up with this lovely image for this year, Chinese New Year. And it was this. And they did everything right. They thought family in China, that's really good, isn't it? And they hired some famous actors and actresses in China. They got a famous American photographer to come and take this beautiful photograph. They put it up to launch their new product range for the Year of the Pig, Chinese New Year 2019. And oh my God, what a disaster. What a disaster. Within 24 hours, it had gone viral. In China, they were saying, this is like the poster of a horror movie. It's Kill Our Granny week. And they said, this is totally inappropriate. 24 hours later, after all this viral stuff on social media, everyone's saying, this is terrible. Take it down. God, our granny, terrible. Save her. And of course, they took it down, and then they went for a much more conventional Burberry-style ad. And of course, it cost them a lot in terms of brand damage. It probably got their product launch off to a pretty rocky start. Maybe they sacked a few people in the process, and then they recovered themselves, hopefully, and they can go forward. Now, I'm sure you were thinking like me when you saw that image, well, there's nothing wrong with that. That's pretty good, isn't it? Nice family photograph. But they didn't do their research. We have to do our research in China. We can't assume anything because Burberry can get it wrong. So can we. We need to do our research. No shortcuts around this. Okay, so hands up if you don't have WeChat on your phone. Yes, Jeff, I know about you. No, come on, let's have them back up again. Right. Okay. All of you, I'm sorry to say this, you're all going to have WeChat. Why? Because the Chinese use it. And this is the 3 million people I want you to do business with. They use WeChat. So this is what it looks like. You've already heard Dustin mention it. When you go to China, they're all on WeChat. But here in Australia, we're not all on it. There's actually 3 million, that number again, 3 million WeChat users in Australia, registered and living in Australia. 3 million. There's only about 1.5 million Chinese living in Australia. So there's another 1.5 of us who are non-Chinese who use WeChat. But you need to be one of that 3 million, which is rapidly growing. And the reason for that is the Chinese engage on WeChat. You're a stranger. You need to build a relationship with them in a format, in an environment that they're familiar with, which is WeChat. So of course you get familiar with how do you connect on WeChat, and you build that relationship on WeChat. Then, of course, as you get a bit further advanced, you can use WeChat to promote your products. You can set up a group of your friends, and they'll share it with their friends. You can set up a WeChat page. You can put your products on the WeChat page. You can have links to your website on WeChat, because that's the way they like to look at products. That's the way they do their research. That's the way they interact with brands and customers, and that's how they actually do business in China. So when they come to Australia, they expect to do it the same way. So engage with them. Move from being a stranger to a friend. Every time I connect with somebody in China on WeChat, they say, wow, you use WeChat. I said, well, yeah, doesn't everyone? Because in China, there's about 1 billion users of WeChat. Everybody uses WeChat. That's how you move from being a stranger to a friend. Now you can get into some serious engagement with them, show them things, promote things. And then, of course, when they're ready to transact, they use WeChat Pay. In China, they use WeChat Pay for everything. It's just a click. You just transfer money, pay for things. So, of course, for them, if they want to transact with you and they can do it on WeChat Pay, it's going to go really easily. And then you're now part of their trusted network. They'll be posting, I just bought this wonderful product from Australia. They'll send it to their 1,000 WeChat connections. In no time, there'll be a storm. They'll all be coming to you saying, how do I get that amazing product that my friend just bought? So those of you who are not using WeChat, please go away and start using it. It's no different to WhatsApp. It's actually everything combined, but it's very important for the Chinese. And they're the people. That's the 3 million you're after. And they all, 100% use WeChat all the time. So you need to use it too. Right, so there's 8 out of my 9. 8 out of my 9. So, as I've said, put up some welcome sign. Make them feel welcome. Look at your name and your brand. Think about how you could represent that in the China market in Chinese. Start getting interested in Chinese culture. Ask open questions. Get curious about China. There's a few Chinese people in the room. Ask them at morning tea about Confucius. Think about every interaction as a relationship for the future, not just a transaction. Build that relationship. Cherish it. Communicate with them. Make sure you have a Chinese version of your website. Go through this process of 3 cups of tea, stranger, friend, part of the trusted family, and do your research and start using WeChat. But the final one is this. I've hopefully given you 8 things that you can go and do that will give you access to that 3 million addressable market. What about if you could now address 1 billion people? Because you now know how to engage with the Chinese. There's no reason why you couldn't then start dealing with the China market itself. So that's my last point. Take your product to China, and then you can come and join our association, the Australia-China SME Association. We meet regularly, we help people, we support people, we give people advice around taking their product, their brand, their service into China and try and start addressing that 1 billion people in China. I hope you've all got something out of that. Thank you. Thank you.